So the hemp bill has changed again, and it's shaken the industry up completely, but things are getting a little weird for us home growers and people who are into genetics as well. It does seem to be that the seed laws might be changing too, but there are some caveats. We're going to dive into that in this episode, and we're going to figure out ways to guarantee that we never have to worry about this again, because we're going to make our own. Stay tuned.
Like we always do about this guy.
If you're new here, my name is Rob and we talk all things herb. Today in particular, we're going to be going over this hemp bill just really briefly. However, when it comes to keeping these genetics, we're going to have some key things that we need to do to maintain them, and we'll go over that shortly. But before we do that, quick shout out to the sponsors who help make videos like this available for free, as well as provide some awesome discounts. Now, the grow room's starting to feel a little bit chilly, but your plants don't have to. Enter VivoSun's AeroFlux Smart Grow Tent Heater. 700 watts of PTC heat delivering 30% more power than the standard heaters, built for tense timing and automation. With built-in sensors, it reads the temperature and humidity in real time, adjusts heat to maintain your target VPD, and stays safe with tip over and heat protection. Pair that with VivoSun's smart humidifier line, models like the AeroSteam H19 with Wi-Fi and external temp humidity probe, smart constant humidity control, and whisper quiet output. Whether your tent needs more moisture boost or steady baseline, this unit's got you covered. Use code CLtv at vivosun.com or CLtv Watch on Amazon. And make sure you take advantage of their Black Friday deals, up to 18% off with code CLtv, and any other products at extreme discounts that are going to be very limited as well. And if you're looking for some genetics, check out Seedsman. They got your back. Use discount code CLtv to save yourself a little bit and help the channel. So essentially, the hemp laws are changing. The definition of what hemp is dramatically changing as well. And when it comes to our plant, well, this has never been covered. There's been loopholes and ways that people have found laws that made it legal for them. However, when it boils down to it, this plant is still federally illegal.
That is the stupidest shit I've ever heard in my fucking life!
When it comes to the seeds, this is the problem that concerns me more than anything, is the potential THC from these genetics. Now, testing the seeds, majority of them do test under 0.03. There are some that do test above it. I've known some brands specifically that you may know as well who've dealt with this at customs, and when this happens, unfortunately, you're losing a lot of money and you're losing a lot of time, and it's a headache. So those of us who are dealing with genetics need to understand that some of these brands may not have as many genetics available in the States, which is super unfortunate. So what does this mean for us home growers? Well, anything that tests over 0.03% is going to be federally illegal. So we may be going back to getting genetics via DVDs or cups or shirts that don't fit to guarantee that we get them, and it is what it is. We've done that for a long time. However, there are ways that we can avoid the stress of dealing with this. Where this becomes a major issue is interstate distribution. So when it comes to getting genetics in your legal state, it may not be a problem, but getting genetics from another breeder from a different state or from out of the country, this is where things could become a hurdle, and it depends on how the regulation comes about and if there's going to be testing on every seed that crosses every state line. And in that case, yeah, we do have some stresses, but for the most part, this shouldn't be an issue for majority of people. They're souvenirs, and we're not supposed to germinate them, and they have no THC potential. So, yeah, that's that. However, if you are worried and you want to be able to have your own genetics and maintain them for a while, here's some things that I'd recommend. First, I would start securing some genetics, and I'm not saying panic shop and grab a ton, but there's going to be some that are more affordable now than they will be in 2026, especially getting closer to November 2026 when the deadline hits, that you may be able to find more abundantly now. So in that case, if there's deals for Black Friday, if you use discount code CLtv on Seedsman, if you get some of the FTS Swank Genetics collab, shameless plug, those are good options now. But there's tons of breeders you can get direct from that oftentimes will distribute souvenirs, we'll say. So you shouldn't have to worry too much about having to stock up. I wouldn't panic shop. I wouldn't go and get everything and make sure that you have your own bank at home. However, this is where you should potentially start learning about self-pollination or pollinating and creating your own genetics at home. So let's start with the most basic way, and that's by finding a good male and a good female and letting them book. Now, you want to find something that grows vigorously for a male, something that, you know, potentially has a good stem rub. This isn't a general indicator of being dank, but sometimes it's a general rule of thumb that breeders will go with. Oftentimes, you're going to want to look at your leaf to bud ratio and your node space. These are things that'll help you because oftentimes that male will give some dominant traits that come through to the female, depending on the lineage, obviously, that'll really show through in the F1 generation or the first generation that you breed. Now when it comes to the female, pick your keeper female, something that's dank, something that grows good and isn't susceptible to too much stress and doesn't herm out on you. You don't want to take genetics that are weak and try to add something else to it, because it could potentially make it even worse and water it down, and you'll lose those good traits while maintaining the shitty traits. Now you could breed it further down the line, but that's something for a whole nother video. Now with the male and female, essentially you could just keep those in the same room and let the male pollinate the female. You could either grab it, cut it off, and shake it over the whole room, or you can let it naturally do its thing in the space. Now, oftentimes, if you have fans blowing, it'll move the pollen in the room, so most of the plant will get covered. The plant that's touching the male is going to get the pollen on it the most. The side that's touching and exposed to it clearly will be full of seeds. On the other side, it may not be as abundant, so you might want to grab the plant itself and shake it over top. Now, if you're doing this in a space like I have here, where you're growing multiple plants, you want to have separate areas with airflow that's very contained and separated from the rest of your flowering areas or veg areas. So for example, I'm doing a little bit of breeding work in this tent here, and I'm flowering in this tent here. Super ballsy, I know. Hear me out though.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm kind of retarded.
I have 2 separate intake areas and I have 2 separate exhaust areas. I also make sure I've got filtration, and I spray down with water every so often to make sure any excess pollen isn't blowing around in here. I also don't have any major fans in there. I just have air bringing in and out the outside. So I'm making sure we're not crossing any paths and there's no issues. If I ever open up this tent, it's when these tents are totally closed. And again, the water spraying, you know, I don't know what my spray bottle is, but grab a spray bottle, spray down your room a little bit. I know it'll get wet, but that pollen won't be able to move around as abundantly. Now in this case, I was able to harvest male pollen, extract it completely, and bring it upstairs into my freezer where I'm able to store it for a while. You want to be able to store it with silica packs and keep it in something like parchment paper inside of a plastic bag. Make sure this is airtight, of course, and expect to have it for 6 months to maybe a year. It really just depends on how fresh that pollen is when you harvested it. Now, you have your male and your females next to each other, or you have your pollen separate. This is going to take some time, but you'll notice that your plant's going to start developing some seeds around maybe week 5, week 6. And sometimes it's hard to see inside of the plant itself. It could take longer depending on that cultivar. But just know that your harvesting window is going to be a little bit different compared to when you're harvesting a regular female plant. You need those seeds to mature. So give it maybe 10, 11 weeks if you have an 8 to 9 weeker. Or if you have a 12, 13 weeker, I know we might have to go 15 weeks, which is absolutely crazy, but you gotta do what you gotta do. We're trying to harvest the seeds here. It's not about the flower. And in that case, the flower is not going to be nearly as good. So you could discard that or use it for edibles or whatever you feel like doing. But at that point, we're going to be harvesting the seeds. You can separate the seeds. You can organize them however you'd like to. You can create seed separators. But storing these seeds is just like storing the rest of your seeds. However, these are going to be so fresh that your germination rate will probably be extremely high, at least in my experience. So depending on your space, you may want to do targeted branch pollination, something that's going to be a little more controllable. So essentially, one space in your grow tent, you're going to pollinate that branch, maybe with a paintbrush with some pollen on it directly, and you're going to put a bag over top of it. And yes, this will be suffocating the plant a little bit, but it'll do fine. It'll still survive. And you're going to be able to keep that pollen from the rest of your plant, so you can still harvest some actual flower while still getting some seeds to start with. You want to leave the bag on there for 12 to 24 hours, and then eventually you pull it off there. The pollen is going to be on the plant itself, and it shouldn't be exposed to the rest of your plant. You may find a couple seeds here and there, but your goal is to make some seeds anyways, so extra's extra. The next method would be self-pollination, and this is where oftentimes you can get more of a stable version of what you're having here. We're essentially taking the pollen from that female plant and we're pollinating its sister or itself. And in this case, get your keeper phenos going first. Don't just pollinate anything to have feminized seeds or to have S1s. You want to guarantee that what you're having is going to be dank in quality. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. So self-pollination is something I'm going to dabble into a little bit more down the road, but for now, I'm doing the more traditional method. But here's how you go about it. You want to utilize STS or colloidal silver. You'll start spraying your plant 10 to 14 days before flipping to 12-12, and then continue spraying daily up to 21 days total. And then you're going to want to stop spraying once you start to actually see those male sacs popping up. Now, when you're spraying, you want to hit the underside of the leaves, you want to hit every node, you want to hit all parts of the plant. You want it to totally get with inside of the plant itself, because again, we're trying to flip it. We're trying to give it the old transition move, we'll say.
It is ma'am. Motherfucker, take it outside. If you want to call me sir again, I will show you a fucking sir. I apologize. Motherfucker.
And in this case, you need to stress it out. So this is where heavy spray is the goal. Now, ideally, you're going to want to spray when lights are just coming on. You never want to spray when lights are completely off or there's just no light in there. You can run into mold or powdery mildew in your grow as well. These are key things to avoid at any time, but especially when we're doing a breeding project. Now, harvesting pollen from males or harvesting pollen from reversed females is going to be the same thing. And my suggestion is what I learned from the homie Swank Genetics. You don't necessarily have to keep that plant in your grow the entire time. Once you get to, say, week 3 of flower with this male, you can take it, cut the branch off, and put it in a cup and put it in water in a separate space. This will still continue to mature, and eventually pollen will open up and drop all over underneath wherever you're holding it. Now in my case, I had a tin with some parchment paper. I set them there and I let them continue to chill until they busted everywhere. No diddy, my friend. Now you want to make sure you're changing your water daily, and knowing that you're in this space where there's pollen, mine was underneath me here at the time. You want to make sure, again, you're spraying that water on there. You're not going into your grow at any point. You're not cross-contaminating. You change your clothes afterwards. You wear a damn hazmat suit even. Pollen can go everywhere. And these days, I know we want to get seeds for ourselves, but we don't want to smoke seeds. It's just not the goal. So make sure that you're safe and careful when you're going about this, and you don't run into any contamination problems because you're doing it right. Some key tips for collecting pollen and doing this little breeding project here, what I've done myself, I've learned some things that have been massive failures and massive successes. So one would definitely, again, make sure your area is clean. Make sure everything's tight and right. And when you're handling any pollen, you do not touch any other plants. I've said it a few times. I'll say it again. Don't touch other plants unless you want them to have seeds, period. It sucks when it happens. It really does, because when your plant's focusing on growing seeds, it's going to do less growing bud. It's going to take all that energy to reproduce versus producing. So in that case, whatever you thought you were going to have, not only is the quality going to be lowered, but the yield will be lowered. So again, make sure everything's tight and right. Then I would make sure when you're collecting your pollen that you're not having all the sacs left in there. Just get the pollen itself. You can use something like a toothpick, literally just dab it on the tongue, touch those pieces, flick it out of there, or just slightly separate it or use tweezers, whatever you got to do. Some people utilize things like a mesh net or pantyhose even, but I've noticed that you're losing a lot of pollen when you're going about it that way. And next would be to make sure you don't get caught up on too many strains at once, because we're dealing with F1s, so you're going to have a variety of phenotypes. So hunt those first, and if you want to refine it and work it down even better, you can get to F2s, to F3s, to F4s. There's a whole variety of things that you can really dive deep into. We talked about that on episodes on From the Stash, and it's something that maybe we'll have to dive back into again soon. So at the end of the day, the laws have always been weird for us in our space, and no matter what, we're going to continue on and going to make this work for us as a community. If there's some other things that you feel could help the community, drop them below in the comment section. And if you want to watch some more videos like this, check this one out up here. Stay lifted. Thanks for watching. Peace.